Imagine a single mine detonating beneath Russia's Spearhead before dawn. Within minutes, their entire formation began to unravel. Russia sent 2 brigades, over 100 armoured vehicles, into what they expected would be a decisive breakthrough. Instead, the offensive collapsed almost immediately. The lead tank was immobilised by mines, and before the main force could respond, drones relayed precise coordinates for artillery strikes. FPV drones targeted Russian armoured vehicles, turning the advance into a scene of chaos and destruction. This battle demonstrated that raw numbers and firepower are no longer decisive in modern warfare. Precision, real-time intelligence, and layered defences now determine the outcome. The events that followed revealed just how quickly a modern offensive can break down before it even begins. A failed offensive, mines, chaos, and the end of a formation. Russia's large-scale assault began with a mechanized reconnaissance unit leading over 100 armored vehicles into what they anticipated would be a decisive advance. The plan relied on speed and overwhelming force to breach Ukrainian lines, but the offensive encountered immediate and catastrophic resistance. As the column pushed forward in the pre-dawn darkness, the lead tank triggered a concealed mine, erupting in a sudden blast that sent shockwaves through the entire formation. Crews following behind witnessed the destruction firsthand, and the cohesion of the assault broke almost instantly. The abrupt loss of the Spearhead vehicle forced other drivers to swerve, hesitate, and lose contact with the planned movement, fracturing the offensive before it could gain momentum. Moments later, Ukrainian artillery struck an armoured personnel carrier further back in the line. The vehicle was destroyed before it could reach the front, and the impact of this loss compounded the confusion already spreading through Russian ranks. The initial plan, an organised aggressive advance, unravelled as vehicles scattered, unable to maintain formation or find cover. The area's forest belts and hidden minefields made manoeuvring hazardous, channeling vehicles into predictable paths where they became easy targets. The terrain, designed to funnel attackers and expose them to fire, eliminated any hope of regaining control. Russian commanders faced a rapidly deteriorating situation. Their main force was now exposed and isolated, unable to coordinate a unified attack. The psychological impact of these early losses was immediate and severe. The sight of the lead tank destroyed by a mine shattered any sense of invincibility among the crews. Instead of pressing forward, drivers and commanders hesitated, unsure if the next step would trigger another explosion. Communication between units began to break down, and the formation lost its structure. With the offensive's momentum gone, the advancing units became increasingly vulnerable to Ukrainian fire from concealed positions. The anticipated breakthrough stalled in open ground, with Russian vehicles spread thin and unable to support one another. Ukraine wasted no time exploiting this chaos. Within minutes, Bradley IFVs surged forward, their 25mm cannons targeting Russian troops and vehicles already trapped in the maze of forested paths and craters. Ukrainian commanders recognized the rare opportunity presented by the disorganized assault and moved quickly to press their advantage. The Bradley vehicles, operating with speed and precision, provided suppressive fire that pinned Russian units in place, while Ukrainian infantry coordinated their movements to seal off potential escape routes. The rapid response left Russian forces unable to regroup or establish a defensive perimeter. Some Russian infantry attempted to dismount and reach Ukrainian trench lines, but they were quickly pinned under intense counterfire. The well-prepared Ukrainian positions, combined with overlapping fields of fire, made any attempt to secure a foothold costly and ineffective. Isolated from their supporting vehicles and unable to communicate effectively, Russian soldiers found themselves trapped and exposed. The initial hope of exploiting a breach in Ukrainian defences faded as each attempt to advance was met with immediate and overwhelming resistance. The scale of the failure became increasingly clear as the offensive ground to a halt. The supposed advantage of massed armour and firepower was neutralised by the combination of hidden mines, restrictive forest belts, and rapid Ukrainian countermeasures. Russian vehicles, forced into narrow corridors by the terrain, became easy targets for artillery and anti-armour teams. The inability to adapt to these setbacks turned Russia's numerical strength into a liability. with each stalled vehicle and scattered unit adding to the confusion. Ukraine's deep familiarity with the local terrain provided a decisive edge. Bradley crews and small infantry teams moved through concealed routes, striking at exposed Russian hardware and blocking any attempts to reinforce the front. Russian units seeking cover or regrouping instead found themselves funneled into kill zones, where Ukrainian forces could target them with precision. The disorganization and lack of situational awareness among Russian forces made coordinated action impossible, and the offensive devolved into isolated pockets of resistance with no prospect of success. As damage mounted across the Russian front, any hope of a renewed push evaporated. The attack that began with the confidence of two brigades was reduced to scattered remnants unable to reform. The opening phase, intended to deliver a decisive breakthrough, instead revealed the vulnerabilities of relying solely on brute force in the face of prepared defences and adaptive tactics. But Russia wasn't finished yet. Reinforcements were already moving up behind the shattered vanguard. What awaited them beyond the crater field would prove even deadlier. Turning the tide, drones, cluster munitions, and the precision strike advantage. The next phase of the battle was defined not by massed armour, but by the relentless integration of technology and precision weaponry. Ukraine's advantage began with its mastery of aerial surveillance. High above the battlefield, reconnaissance, UAVs, scanned every movement, transmitting real-time coordinates of Russian reinforcements and vehicle concentrations to Ukrainian artillery. These drones, operating continuously and often undetected, provided commanders with a live map of Russian intentions. As fresh Russian units assembled behind the cratered front, they found themselves under constant observation, their positions exposed before they could even organize for a renewed push. The impact was immediate. Russian columns attempting to regroup became targets for a new kind of warfare, first with reconnaissance UAVs tracking their every move, then with explosive-laden FPV drones hunting halted vehicles and columns. As soon as drones identified clusters of tanks, supply trucks, or armoured personnel carriers, Ukrainian artillery units responded with cluster munitions. Each shell scattered submunitions over a wide area, damaging multiple vehicles in a single volley, and reducing entire convoys to twisted wreckage within seconds. Survivors scrambled for cover, but with no terrain left unscouted, there was nowhere to hide. The scale of destruction was clear. Russian reinforcements were neutralized before they could reach the forward line, and any attempt to consolidate or maneuver was met with immediate lethal force. This precise coordination between drone operators and artillery crews was central to Ukraine's defense. Rather than relying on blind barrages, Ukrainian forces targeted the most valuable concentrations of Russian hardware at moments of maximum vulnerability, when vehicles idled in staging areas or troops massed for deployment. Russian commanders watched reinforcements vaporize on screens. Any movement now spelled death. The psychological effect was severe. Soldiers accustomed to relative safety behind the lines now faced the constant threat of detection and annihilation. The knowledge that a drone's camera might be fixed on any gathering point eroded morale and trust in their own defensive measures. One incident underscored the effectiveness of this approach. A Russian tank convoy, halted in a field to receive new orders, was spotted by a reconnaissance drone. As the UAV relayed coordinates, an FPV drone maneuvered through the tree cover to visually confirm the target. Ukrainian artillery opened fire within moments. Half the convoy was shredded before the column could react, with the remaining vehicles scattering into exposed ground. The aftermath left only burning wrecks and isolated groups of survivors, unable to regroup or provide mutual support. The scene repeated itself across the sector. Every new concentration of Russian forces became an opportunity for Ukrainian precision strikes. The psychological toll deepened with each failed attempt to reinforce or maneuver. Russian units, aware that any movement might be observed and targeted, hesitated to leave cover or assemble in numbers. The constant threat from above forced commanders to abandon established tactics, undermining coordination and paralyzing decision-making. Even attempts to find new staging grounds proved futile, as drones quickly identified alternative routes and gathering points, relaying their positions for immediate attack. The battlefield became a place where even the act of waiting for orders invited destruction. Ukraine's integration of drones and cluster munitions did more than inflict physical losses. It rendered Russian numerical superiority irrelevant. Each additional vehicle or soldier sent forward only increased the density of targets for Ukrainian artillery. The doctrine of massed armor, once central to Russian offensive operations, became a liability under the scrutiny of persistent aerial surveillance and rapid wide-area strikes. The more Russia tried to reinforce, the more vulnerable its forces became. This transformation of the battlefield was not limited to the destruction of vehicles and troops. Ukrainian drone operators identified critical logistical nodes, bridges, crossroads, and supply depots, sending coordinates to artillery units that systematically targeted and destroyed these assets. The cumulative effect was to sever Russian lines of communication and supply, isolating frontline units and preventing effective reinforcement or retreat. Every attempt at regrouping met the same fate: rapid detection, immediate targeting, and devastating losses. By the close of this phase, Russian troops faced a stark reality. The presence of drones overhead signaled that no movement, no matter how small or carefully planned, could escape detection and attack. The Russian advance stalled, not because of a lack of will, but because the cost of every action had become unpredictably high. Commanders could no longer rely on massed force or rapid maneuver. Instead, they watched as their options dwindled with each passing hour. As Russian troops reeled from these losses, Kyiv's planners were already setting the stage for an even more lethal trap. Ambushes and innovation, pre-mined paths and hidden kill zones. The Russian attempt to recover momentum quickly met a new set of obstacles. As their battered columns shifted to side roads in hopes of bypassing the main kill zone, they encountered another layer of Ukrainian planning. These alternate routes, appearing less defended, had been seeded in advance with mines by Ukrainian engineers. The first Russian vehicles to enter these paths triggered detonations that tore apart tanks and infantry fighting vehicles, instantly blocking the route and trapping the remainder of the column in a confined space. With their reconnaissance unit neutralized by that first mine, Russian columns advanced blind into side road ambushes, unable to anticipate what lay ahead. Immobilized and clustered, the Russian vehicles became prime targets for the next phase of the ambush. Hidden anti-tank teams along the forest edges fired Conker's missiles at stalled vehicles, picking off armoured personnel carriers and supply trucks with precision. The confined geography of the side roads left Russian crews with no room to manoeuvre or escape, and the sudden missile strikes ignited vehicles in quick succession. Each missile strike further congested the route, compounding the chaos and making it impossible for units behind to reverse or find cover. As rockets streaked across the tree line, Bradley infantry fighting vehicles took up positions behind cover, using their thermal sights and 25mm cannons to deliver suppressive fire. Russian infantry, attempting to dismount and find shelter, were met with accurate volleys from the Bradleys, which kept them pinned and unable to organise a counterattack or retreat. The combination of anti-tank teams and Bradley fire support ensured that any attempt at regrouping was met with immediate, overwhelming violence. Simultaneously, Ukrainian FPV drones swept low over the battlefield, searching for targets among the immobilized vehicles. Once a stalled tank or carrier was located, operators guided explosive-laden drones directly into engine compartments or exposed rear armor. The drones' precision and speed allowed them to bypass any remaining defenses, often destroying vehicles in a single strike. For Russian crews trapped inside, the sound of approaching drones brought a new level of psychological pressure. There was no warning, only a sudden explosion and the collapse of another vehicle. This ambush was not improvised. The Ukrainian defense relied on a deliberate sequence: mines to halt and channel the enemy, anti-tank teams to destroy high-value targets, and drones to finish anything left operational. Each component maximized the impact of the others. The forested terrain bordering the side roads provided excellent concealment for Ukrainian infantry and missile teams, while the loss of Russian reconnaissance meant attackers advanced with no clear picture of the threats ahead. Ukrainian forces exploited the terrain as a force multiplier, using every tree line and trench as cover for coordinated strikes. The Russian response was fragmented and ineffective. Radio transmissions intercepted by Ukrainian forces revealed confusion and mounting panic as commanders tried to find alternate routes or organize a retreat, only to encounter more mines or renewed missile fire. Vehicles abandoned by their crews became obstacles for those behind, further congesting the narrow paths. Infantry units, cut off from armoured support and under constant suppressive fire, abandoned positions and attempted to escape on foot, only to be targeted by Bradleys or hunted by drones. Each new attempt to advance or reposition resulted in fresh losses. The scale of the ambush's effectiveness was measured not just in destroyed vehicles, but in the collapse of Russian command and control. The layered defences left the attackers with no safe options. Every route forward was anticipated, every fallback position targeted. The psychological toll was clear in intercepted communications. Units reported being unable to move, unable to coordinate, and unable to defend themselves against attacks coming from multiple directions and domains. By the time Russian commanders realized the extent of the trap, the cost was irreversible. Nearly every alternate route had been mined. Every attempt to break through met with coordinated missile fire and drone strikes. The Russian offensive, built on the expectation of massed armour and rapid manoeuvre, was reduced to isolated pockets of resistance, unable to regroup or mount any meaningful defence. The Ukrainian approach, combining mines, concealed missile teams, precise drone strikes and Bradley fire support, rendered brute force irrelevant in the face of coordinated, adaptive tactics. And just when the carnage peaked, NATO's Leopard 2s loomed at the forest edge, ready to strike from a distance. The arrival of these tanks signalled a new phase of dominance, one that underscored how modern warfare is shaped not by numbers, but by precision, coordination, and innovation. The scale of Russia's defeat was unmistakable. 2 brigades and over 100 armoured vehicles were rendered combat ineffective by a defence built on real-time intelligence, layered minefields, and coordinated strikes. Ukraine's integration of drones and precision artillery ensured that each Russian move was anticipated and countered, leaving attackers unable to regroup or adapt. This battle didn't just repel an assault, it rewrote the rules of engagement, showing that in modern war, information and agility trump massed armour. If you found this breakdown insightful, hit like and subscribe for more deep dives into the tech shaping tomorrow's battlefields.